Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gouveia. I am a criminal defense attorney at the R&R Law Group. We're located in the always beautiful and sunny and a little bit gloomy today. We've had some rain the last week, really. It's been actually quite beautiful. Scottsdale, Arizona, where my team and I, we help good people charged with crimes find safety, clarity, and hope. And today, boy, oh boy, we've got some business to attend to. And as you know, we like to go to our mind map to get our bearings straight and see sort of the three big segments that we'll unpack today. We're going to start off by talking about the big news. Obviously, recession, that's the word of the day. Woke up this morning, you saw the big headlines out that, quarter two numbers are in, and it's looking like there's a recession. And there's a big debate, a lot of debate this year, really, about all sorts of definitions, about, well, you know what all the definitions are. There's too many to count. There's like a whole alphabet of them. But the point is, now the word recession is something that is really being debated. I've got a supercut of all the people who defined it one way. Then we're going to take a look and piece together really what Biden says is happening, because we've got several bits. We've got reaction from him. We're going to take a look at what KJP has to say. That's Karine Jean-Pierre, who is the White House press secretary now. She's the one who replaced Jen Psaki. And so Peter Doocey was asking her about it. You can see my mind map. I sort of didn't have a lot of time today, so it's less pretty today. I'm not real happy about it, but you can see, look at all these clips. We've got a lot of clips to attend to. Joe Biden was out. He gave us his take on the whole matter. And so it was very sort of short. He took no questions on the recession, and they're trying to, pick the definition that works for them. Problem with that is they've already used some of the old definitions. So for example, this guy, Economic Adviser Deese, in 2008, he framed a recession one way, and then yesterday he framed a recession the other way, right? So we're going to be able to see exactly what the distinction is, or how this is, how they're trying to have it both ways, so to speak. So we'll go through all of that. We'll take a look at some of the reality, what the actual economic numbers look like. Typically, I like to go over to zerohedge.com. They have some good economic stuff, and so we'll see what some of the charts look like. I'm not an expert on this, but I just want to sort of show you what the experts are looking at in order to give us this feeling that Joe Biden is watching the American economic system just crumble around us. So that is going to be sort of the more political segment of the day. And then we're going to take a look at this very interesting story, which is something that came from our friend, the Jerry Nadler, the guy that we kind of like to make fun of here. He sort of is waddling around Congress most of the time with his 35-pound diaper. But today, a big one must have leaked out of there, and he just dropped it right all over America, because there's this story that the courts, the federal court management system, okay, like the thing that we check all the time on here. We look at Pacer and we look at the federal dockets. That's where I get my motions, and everything is sort of cataloged in there. It's like the case management system. Apparently, it got hacked. And it's like a big deal, because Jerry Nadler came out and he asked this guy, Matthew Olsen, who, you remember him. He's the same guy who is the assistant attorney general for he's sort of the national security branch over at the US DOJ. He's the same guy who's very focused on domestic violent extremism, and he came out with Jill Sanborn from the FBI. We've spent a lot of time talking about him and talking about Jill, because they are both people who are very concerned about DVEs, domestic violent extremism. But he was today in front of the House Judiciary Committee, and Nads was up there. He's the chairman of the committee, and he asked him, right, as soon as the thing came out of the gates, he just jumped right into this question and said, hey, our court systems have been hacked. What does this mean for defendants? Were people released? What's the deal? And everybody in the media, all these legal practitioners, people like myself, were like, what? What do you mean? What do you mean it got hacked? And he's saying, right, Nads came out and he says, how many defendants were implicated by this thing? So nobody really knows. All of this is, it just broke like literally hours ago. So Matthew Olsen's aware of it. They're communicating about this with judges and other people throughout the legal community, and it all just sort of cracked open today. So we'll take a look at that, and it really sort of raised my eyebrows. And then our last segment is going to be about the big tech censorship lawsuit. This is a fun lawsuit, and I don't know where this is going to go. Yesterday, we talked a little bit. Well, I don't remember even what we talked about yesterday. Did we talk about? Let's check. I can check because check this out. Look at this. Boom. What did we talk about yesterday? Trump's plan, Murdoch, and the J6 hearings. No, that was the day before. Huh. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think I talked about it on our morning walk and talk. That must have been it. Oh no, there it is. We did talk about it yesterday. The Tennessee versus Biden lawsuit. Okay, that was the one that has 23 states. We hit that one yesterday. 23 states, and this is part of the overall narrative that we've really been sort of talking a lot about here. It's the federal government versus the states. That as the federal government says we can solve these problems, and then they don't, the states are going to say, well, okay. Then how about you just let us handle our own affairs? If you can't secure the border, we'll take care of it. If you can't protect this, that, or the other, then we'll just handle it on our own. And every time the feds try to encroach on the states are now fighting back. You know, they not used to do that. But here, we talked yesterday about the transgender lunch money lawsuit, which was 23 different states. Today, we're going to pick back up talking about Missouri and Louisiana also suing Biden. And this lawsuit, actually, this complaint started some time ago back in May, but now there was a very recent discovery order that came out. And you'll notice that it's Dr. Fauci who's right here. And he's named in this lawsuit. He's named with Jen Psaki. He's named with Biden. He's named with the HHS, Health and Human Services, and people from the CDC. The lawsuit from the states, they're alleging that the federal government was colluding with the big tech companies to craft the narrative around COVID, around Hunter Biden, around all these things, which of course we know was true because we were covering it here on this channel. In fact, I got suspended from YouTube. I got my first strike. Oh, what a momentous thing that was. Because of medical misinformation. Because YouTube was telling me what reality was, I guess. I don't even know what it was about. But I had to be put in bad timeout mode because of them. Okay, so now they're suing, right? The states are saying, hey, look, you are responsible for all sorts of misinformation. You guys are worse spreaders of misinformation than even the misinformationists. So there's a lawsuit, and there was a motion to dismiss and a discovery order. So this was actually kind of what was cool about this. I wasn't really sure where this lawsuit was going to go, but some time ago, there was an actual order from the judge that says to the states, tell me what you want. And you have my permission to go file interrogatories with up to 5 different social media companies and get answers from them, right? So actually, like, it's a discovery order. Yes, you can go get information from these big tech companies. Let us know what you need. And then the government has the opportunity to object to some of those questions. And we're going to piece all that together today on the show. But it's a lot. Look at this. I mean, there's a lot to attend to. And so, we can't waste any more time. We have to get right to it. And if you want to be a part of the show, of course, the place to do that is over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. You can see that's the web address right there. It's best if you just throw that into a browser and come over there and just click join at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. They're chatting away over there. We've got JC the Music Man, Zach Nichols is here, John McGarvey, B Spec is also here. And we were having a conversation this morning after our morning walk and talk. Although it was sort of like a late morning walk and talk. It was raining here in Arizona this morning. But we were carrying on the conversation from yesterday. Radice's in the house. And they're all part of the community. It's a great spot. And if you still want those morning walk and talks and you want to join up on YouTube, click that join button. It's right there, right next to that red subscribe button. And of course, as I mentioned at the start of the show, if you happen to know anybody in the state of Arizona who is charged with a crime, we would love the opportunity to help. Any criminal charge, any type of infraction, we can help. 480-787-0394. We love to help good people charged with crimes find safety, clarity, and hope. We offer free case evaluations, and your referrals really keep us busy, and I'm very grateful for them. So thank you for those. All right. And so without any further delay, after I say shout outs to K-Bean, Lava Java Lava, and Lean, who are modding down the fort on the YouTube chat. Sedona Rocks is here saying New Jersey in the house. SoCal's in the house from JP Doomer, and they're chatting away over on Rumble. Curtis Bartles here, Shane Sousa, Ben Dover. We were talking with Just Cause earlier in the house. Shout out to K-Bean, Leon Kingsley, and D-Sta. They're all here in the house. All right, and so Now, my friends, we can jump into business. And so our first story, of course, is the Joe Biden recession. And so let's just clean up our mind map so that we know what we're talking about here today. And there it is. The Joe Biden recession begins. We're in quarter two. We're in quarter three, but we've got numbers now. And the numbers don't look all that good. But the White House is trying to have it sort of both ways. They're looking back and they're saying, many of these economic metrics are irrelevant. We don't like those anymore. We like what we want to use today to further our narrative. And you can see there's a lot to unpack. We've got our first sort of baseline that we need to set. So when we ask these questions, one of the things we can do here is really dive into the weeds, and we can say, well, what happens with all of the complicated numbers and how do we assemble them? And then you can debate over the numbers, right? You can debate the technicalities on these things. So for example, what the White House is going to say is they're going to refer us over to this organization called the NBER, NBER.org, the National Bureau of Economic Research. And here it tells us this is the business cycle dating chart, right? And so basically what they're doing is they're going to tell us that they define a recession according to this sentence here. A recession is the period between a peak of economic activity and its subsequent trough, or the lowest point, right? So sort of on this wave between the high point, the peak economic activity, and its subsequent trough, the low point. Between the trough and the peak, the economy is in an expansion. Expansion is the normal state of the economy, and most recessions are brief. Okay, so they sort of tell you here. Now, it is also something where there's a lot of different factors. It's not confined to one sector. The committee emphasizes wide measures of economic activity and so on, right? So it's a very complicated sort of analysis that takes place. And we don't need to bore ourselves with this. You can even ask yourselves, is that 2-quarter metric reasonable? Doesn't matter. The point is, we can just listen to what they have to say about it, their own people, right? So here you go. Tom Elliott posted this over on Twitter this afternoon. He said, good news, quote, recession now means strong economy. And this is the Supercut. And this is the one that, sort of he assembled or somebody assembled. It's 2 minutes. We'll just take a quick look at what this says. Here it is.
All signs are that this is a strong economy, and the probability of a recession within the next year is not particularly elevated.
It's a strong economy, and nothing about it suggests that it's close to or vulnerable to a recession.
I don't expect a recession.
No one is predicting a recession now.
We are not expecting that we are already in a recession. In fact, the guts and the bones of this economy remain strong.
These are not the marks of an economy in recession.
Right now, we don't see a recession. Right now, we're not in a recession right now.
This is not an economy that's in recession.
Not only is a recession not inevitable, but I think that a lot of people are underestimating those strengths and the resilience of the American economy.
We have a strong labor market, which you don't normally see in a recession.
Okay, so you see what's happening here, right? They're saying it's sort of, they're prognosticating there's not going to be a recession, and they're jumping into those variables that we just looked at from the NBER that is sort of hinting that, maybe it's not about only the GDP numbers. There's also some other things that might go into it.
Recession is broad-based weakness in the economy. We're not seeing that now.
In your view, is a recession in the United States inevitable?
No.
Typically, economists date a recession as being at least 2 quarters of negative growth and other factors, which we have not seen at all.
Wait, okay. Wait a minute. So that was her standard, right? So who is this woman?
And other factors, which we have not seen at all.
The idea that 2 quarters of negative GDP growth is a technical definition of a recession is wrong.
A common definition of recession is 2 negative quarters of GDP growth.
Wait. So here you've got this Jared Bernstein. We're going to hear from him in a minute. He says that 2 quarters of negative economic growth is a technical definition, but not a good one. And then you have the Treasury Secretary who comes out and says that it is a good definition. So I'm confused. These people are way smarter than I am on these. He's an economic advisor and he's on TV. What is this? I don't even know what he's on. But it's got a Chiron and it's got, CNBC. They've got stock market numbers on there. I mean, now obviously there's numbers on there with pluses and minus signs and reds and greens. So obviously they know what they're talking about. Let's listen to him.
The idea that 2 quarters of negative GDP growth is a technical definition of a recession is wrong.
A common definition.
Okay, so he says it's wrong, But this is Janet Yellen. She's the Treasury Secretary. She's smarter than he is for sure. So let's listen to her.
Definition of recession is two negative.
Wait, hold on. Let's make sure we hear it.
Is wrong.
A common definition of recession is two negative quarters of GDP growth.
2 quarters of negative growth in a row, that's a recession.
Right, and certainly in terms of the technical definition, it's not a recession. The technical definition considers a much broader spectrum of data points.
What is exactly the White House's definition of a recession?
Again, I'm not going to define it from here.
How worried should Americans be that we could be in a recession?
We're not going to be in a recession.
Nobody, including especially the White House and especially Joe Biden, is going to sugarcoat any of this.
Well, I'm not concerned about a recession. And I mean, you're always concerned about a recession.
All right. So that is the president. Now, so it's kind of complicated, I suppose. So one way to interpret it is that 2 quarters of declining GDP is a recession because you sort of have a downward trend, right? Things aren't looking all that good. And they're saying, Janet Yellen says, it is kind of a recession but kind of not. So it's a weird thing. It's complicated. I don't know. This is a reality, according to some people who I think are more, sort of boots in the ground on this. I typically check out Zero Hedge, and they posted this morning, 5:40 a.m. They say, all right, look at this. Here's the numbers. We're looking like a recession big time. Considering the dismal Atlanta Fed GDP now prints in recent weeks and considering the full court press, hardly going to be a surprise. But in any case, moments ago, the Bureau of Economic Analysis confirmed what everyone has long known, and that is that the Biden economy is now in a technical recession. The first estimate of Q2 GDP came in at 0.9%, down. Still the second consecutive quarter of declining GDP as far as the markets are concerned. As far as the markets are concerned, they write that is the definition of a recession. And so they show you there, right, 2 negative quarters. You see that big quarter down, right? That was 2020. So that was quarter 2, 2020, which was COVID. Pandemonium, and people are digging in with Joe Biden saying, I helped to pull this country out of a recession before, and as president, I'll do it again. And it's going, those numbers don't look so good. And you take a look, at sort of how this breaks down. Inventory's down, real GDP percent change is down, obviously. Exports are up, consumer spending is up, but everything else is down across the board. All right, so we get the gist of that. Now, the reaction once all of this hit really kind of hit the fan today as Doocey over from Fox News got into it with KJP. And here is what the first little bit of this sounded like. I've got 4 clips of this, and here is this was today, I believe.
If things are going so great, though, then why is it the White House officials are trying to redefine recession?
No, we're not redefining recession.
If we all understand a recession to be 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth in a row, and then you have White House officials come up here to say, no, that's not what a recession is. It's something else. How is that not redefining recession?
Because that's not the definition.
Because that's not the definition. Okay, so we're fighting over definitions again, and I'm not an economist or a biologist, and so, some things are better left to the experts, I suppose. But now, right, this is how she responds to Doocey. She says specifically, Biden is the one responsible for saving the economy, not for destroying the economy. He turned the economy on, which is a little bit of an interesting new talking point that we have from them.
So as you talk about plans on the other side, it was this president's plans that contributed to inflation, right?
No, it was not. It was this president's plan. If we talk about the American Rescue Plan, look, Peter, when the president walked into this administration, there was an economic crisis. There was a COVID crisis. There was a climate change crisis.
We don't watch a lot of KJP on here for this reason. It's really kind of difficult. She's kind of condescending to Peter. Look, Peter. She's like, hey, look, stupid. And he watch his facial expression. He kind of goes, oh, gosh.
President's plans that contributed to inflation, right?
No, it was not. It was this president's plan. If we talk about the American Rescue Plan, look, Peter, when the president walked into this administration, There was an economic crisis. There was a COVID crisis. There was a climate change crisis. And we're still dealing with a lot of that right now. But the president turned the economy back on. There were businesses that were closed, schools that were closed. And because of the American Rescue Plan, by the way, no Republican voted for that plan. And that plan had $350 billion for public safety, another thing that Republicans talk about, but they actually don't do.
Yikes.
And they don't push forward on a policy.
Okay, so real quick. So she just pivoted from this issue. She said, Republicans didn't support our plan, by the way, for law enforcement. And you go, well, hold on a minute. You ran on defund the police. What are you talking about? That's number one. Number two, she said we also spent $250 billion. So you go, yeah, the American Rescue Plan, right? That was a big bloated federal stimulus that was just spending money all over the place. So that's what people are pointing to say Joe Biden came in and the budget just got ballooned through the roof. So the response here that, look, we're not responsible for this. We spent $250 billion is like, well, that's what we're mad about. You spent too much money and now there's inflation everywhere.
Policy that will help our law enforcement. That plan helped put us in a stronger labor market and help make our economy stronger. And so that is what is happening.
That's responsible for the recession, the declining GDP.
It is not the president that has created inflation. There are also outside factors that has led us to where we are today.
All right. So it's a strange thing. It's very weird. Now, Doocey just kept going. And so I've got two more clips from him. And he asked specifically, actually, let me play this clip first. Okay. The RNC came out and they posted this. Now, people are just having fun with definitions because, you're sort of making people eat their own words. And to be honest, I don't know how else you deal with this if you are the Biden administration. Like, it is a burning building everywhere you look and everything they touch just turns to garbage. And so they're in a precarious position. What do? They have to pick one number that looks good and then they, run with that. And you can't blame them. That's what politicians do. So here is now the compare and contrast version from this guy, Brian Deese. And we've got a clip from 2008 and then Brian Deese yesterday, I believe is when this was.
2 negative quarters of GDP growth is not the technical definition of recession. It's not the definition that economists have traditionally relied on.
Okay. But Brian Deese in 2008 wrote, this is Brian. What Senator Clinton has said is that, of course, economists have a technical definition of recession, which is 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth. And what she's been more focused on is how the economy is impacting typical families. Okay. So you sort of highlight that compare and contrast there. So his the language changes to suit them. And, it's not a big surprise. It's politics. But here is Doocey making them eat their words a little bit.
That is not the definition.
Brian Deese said in 2008, of course, economists have a technical definition, which is of a recession, which is 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth.
I can tell you this.
Yesterday he said 2 negative quarters of GDP growth is not the technical definition of a recession.
It is not. It is not.
Why did he say that
it is not?
Why did he say that it was then in 2008? And it sounds like maybe the only real distinction here is that it's 2 different presidents.
I can speak to what he said yesterday in front of all of you, which is the last thing that you just repeated. There are many factors, economic factors and indicators to consider, and I will say that the textbook definition of recession is not 2 negative quarters of GDP. We have a strong labor market. We have business that's investing.
Does anybody have an economics textbook out there? I'm just curious, like if you've got an 8th grader or something, do they have economics in 8th grade? I don't even remember. I don't remember a lot of those years, but whenever it is, like open it up. What does it say in there? It'd be funny if somebody did that. They say, hey, here in my school, this is what they're teaching, because it could actually be in a textbook. I bet you could find a textbook that has the definition in there that says 2 negative quarters. Somebody should send that to KJP.
We have consumers that are also very much, investing and purchasing. That is incredibly important. We have 3.6 unemployment. You do not see that in a pre-recession, and you do not see that in a recession. So the factors that we are seeing right now, the economic indicators, does not show that we're in a recession. And I'll read, since you gave me some quotes, I'll give you some as well.
Okay.
In 2009, the St. Louis Fed said, while the popular definition of recession is 2 consecutive quarters of negative real gross domestic product GDP growth, the NBER, which we have mentioned many times in this room, does not strictly abide by this designation. Instead, the committee broadly defines a recession as a significant decline in economic activity spreading across the economy, lasting more than a few months. NBER has been around since
Wait a minute, lasting more than a few months? That sounds like 2 quarters. What? She just said economic downturns that last more than a few months. That's like, 6 months would be 2 quarters, right? Am I doing the math? Yeah, I mean, it's 3 plus 3, 6, I think. Hopefully I got that right. Goodness, that would be very embarrassing. Might get a job in the Biden administration. All right, so here's KJP.
20. I'm going to move on.
Moving on. All right. Well, not very useful there, because I think that even according to the NBER definition, that it might actually constitute a recession. Now, it also sounds like this one is sort of backwards looking, right? They sort of wait for the numbers and then they go back and they define, oh yeah, this period was a recession, right? The down period from the highlight and the trough all the way down, recession, because you're losing economic growth. And all right, well, so that's what we've got. Now, they're going to be fighting over the definitions for a long period of time. There are many other people who are almost like kind of happy about this. We saw this morning. KJP joined The View. She's on here for 2 minutes and 17 seconds, really unpacking these economic numbers to sort of break the bad news and paper over a lot of this. And here's what she had to say.
The economy is on all Americans' minds. Families are paying more at the grocery store, feeling the pain at the pump.
Inflation,
and a new report out this
prices.
morning shows that the economy shrank for a second straight quarter, and some say we are officially in a recession. Yet President Biden has said we are on the right path. A lot of Americans don't feel that way. So is there a disconnect here, and is it going to get worse?
So let me just first say, and I want to make sure that I say this to Americans who are watching, your audience, your viewers. The president understands the anxiety that people feel about the economy, about inflation, the cost that they're seeing around them. That's why he has put forward a plan to really attack inflation and bring those costs down. Let me speak to the numbers that you just mentioned, that GDP number that you just mentioned. So if you look at prior recession, what happens before a recession in U.S. history, you see jobs lost. And that's not what we're seeing right now. Right now, we're seeing gains, 2.7 million.
All right. Well, I think that might actually be forward, optimism from these people. Now, hang on one second. I thought I had a link pulled up here that I liked, and somebody actually shared this over on our community, so I'm sort of pulling this up in real time. 1 hour ago. All right, yeah, so this was just a quick assembly now. Zach Nichols shared this over on our locals community. He says, this post posted on LinkedIn, layoffs latest, companies making cuts, updated 1 hour ago from an editor at LinkedIn News. Announcements of layoffs, hiring freezes, and rescinded job offers had roiled the tech industry for several months. All manner of adverse effects are happening right now. Wall Street Journal announcing a job loss on social media, reason twofold. And a list goes on and on. Vox, 39 employees. Shopify is laying off 1,000. New York City Envision also talked about layoffs. Wearable tech maker Whoop is dropping 15% of 630 people. 7-Eleven laid off 880 corporate employees. Lunchbox, 33% of its employees. Ford is cutting 8,000 jobs, right? LinkedIn members have posted about all of these other companies, and the list goes on and on. Genetic firm Invitae, 1,000 employees. Vimeo, okay. Online mortgage banker. Look at this list. Look, it just keeps going and going and going and going and going. All from Jeremy Ragnar. So great link, great share. Thank you for that, Zach. But my point in sharing that is that, they're talking about these optimistic job numbers because they were quite good for a while. But the job losses are in quarter 3. Okay, they all are happening like now in July. They weren't happening in June. So their talking point is based on, good numbers but they're not continuing to be good.
Jobs created in the first 6 months, 1.2 million jobs created in the last quarter, 3.6% unemployment. That matters. And when you look at it more broadly at the data, and that's why we're seeing what we're seeing is that we are in a transition. We had this strong economic growth because of the work that this president has done in the past 18 months. And now what we're seeing is a transition into stable and steady growth. But we get it. We get that people are still feeling a little bit more pain. And so what you're going to hear from the president in the 12 o'clock hour, I hope your audience listens in and your viewers listen in. He's going to talk about how Congress is acting on this piece of legislation called the Inflation Reduction Act.
All right, so the Inflation Reduction Act, that's going to be the new thing that they try to cram down everybody's throat. And we talked a little bit about that on our morning walk and talk today, but I'm not going to really unpack that because it is going to very likely pass. I think it may have already passed today, but it's going to be one of those magical spending bills where they spend money, raise taxes to generate revenue that they'll spend, and it's going to reduce inflation. So these people are just so like illiterate, it's unbelievable. But speaking of that, we have this Jared Bernstein again, one of Biden's economic advisors. Then we'll wrap it up with Joe Biden himself. Here is Bernstein. Bernstein.
I mean, it's been very clear. The president, your whole team has been pushing back aggressively on if the country is in a recession and how worried the country should be about entering a recession in light of this. The New York Times put it this way today. To paraphrase an old political adage, if you're explaining how recession calls are made, you're losing. Do you see that, Jared?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think we've gotten into a technical discussion about what constitutes a recession. And I think, look, bringing the facts to the table is something that we as economic advisors have to do.
Oh, no, we're splitting hairs. He said, she said. I mean, 2 quarters, 3 quarters, 4 quarters, whatever. Stop beating us up about it. Here's Joe Biden, right? He came out for 1 minute, took no questions, and hightailed it as usual.
And just last week, as it had, SK Corporation of the Republic of Korea announced $22 billion in new investment in semiconductor batteries, chargers, and medical devices, creating another 16,000 jobs here in America. And this is powering the strongest rebound in American manufacturing in over 3 decades, creating 613,000 manufacturing jobs. Passing the CHIPS bill is going to put another $72 billion for incentives and tax credits to expand semiconductor production. And the Inflation Reduction Act will add another $370 billion in clean energy tax credits in reconciliation, including incentives to accelerate domestic production of solar panels, wind turbines, batteries, and critical materials processing. That doesn't sound like a recession to me. Thank you very much.
Doesn't sound like a recession to me. He just walks out of there. That doesn't sound like a recession to me, folks. I'll be in my nap room. Okay, well, there's the president. So I guess the numbers are, I must not be, we got a lot of scolding for not following the science. We're trying to follow the economics, but maybe we're not following the economics. Maybe somebody should lecture us about those too. That's Joe Biden. That is the Biden recession fully underway. And I don't take glee with this stuff. A lot of people are sort of, I think they take glee. Oh, good. We're going into recession. Joe Biden's an idiot. And I don't particularly do that. There's going to be a lot of people that are hurt from these policies. And I think a lot about it. I've got a whole team of people that I wake up thinking about and about how this is going to impact, us and them and their lives and our clients and their lives and you and your lives. And it's a lot. But I think what you might be sensing from some people in this story is that all of this felt and feels very foreseeable. All of this was sort of prognosticated. I was screaming about this with many of you here on this channel when there was like 3,000 subscribers on this channel back in March of 2020. All talking about, the bills are going to be due at some point, And it looks like, the consequences are finally catching up with people. So it is a disappointing day to sort of see it now happening and like becoming official. But the deluded people in charge are still just going to keep moving forward, keep spending money, keep raising taxes. And I guess the economic catastrophe will continue to steamroll ahead and will be the ones who suffer the consequences. Oh, all right, my friends. And so that was the Biden recession segment. Now we're going to change gears big time here. And we're going to jump into this story that really kind of caught me by surprise today. And I think it caught a lot of people by surprise. But before we jump into it, we got to take a quick water break here. And we'll do a quick shout out to Tara Rayner here. A little parched today. We have Tara's in the house. Bear Ashby's here with some super chats. And I appreciate everybody. We'll save some of those until the end here. Bear Ashby. All right. And now we're talking about this federal court story. U.S. federal courts may have been hacked in a way that is a serious breach of national security, so much so that it came up today during a House Judiciary Committee hearing that involved Jerry Nadler. You remember Jerry Nadler. He is the chairman of the committee. He is this guy right here. We're going to listen to him asking Mr. Matthew Olsen, who's over at the Department of Justice, specific questions about the hacking of infrastructure from the court management system that is what operates our court system in this country, right? Federal courts, criminal court cases, if they've been hacked, if the data has been compromised, there could be some serious consequences to that. And there was a very deep discussion about that today. So we are going to get into it. Now, the headline, the sort of summation of this comes over from Politico. And I want to give you the background on this, but the headline tells us the Justice Department is investigating a data breach of the federal system. Chair Gerald Nadler described a system security failure of the document management system. And what does this mean? We don't know yet. But it is a scary scenario for the branch. And we saw this, that there were a bunch of Congress people in court today. And this quote is what really stood out to me. This hack, look at this, by 3 hostile foreign actors, saying they attacked the U.S. court's document filing system as part of a breach in early 2020, causing a system security failure. The comments at a national hearing on oversight were the first public disclosure of the hack. This all took place today. Nadler said that it was startling in breadth and scope. And what's very curious about this, and how a lot of this ties into a lot of the same things we've been talking about, right? That's the story over from Politico. We don't know who those 3 foreign actors may be. But remember, there was a hint of this some time ago. If you go over to uscourts.gov and you search for this story, you'll see they tell us this. Judiciary addresses a cybersecurity breach. Extra safeguards are put in place to protect sensitive court records. Now, look at this date. Look at this publication date on this story. Published on January 6, 2021. That date, it just keeps showing up all over the place. So you rewind the clock back to that date. After the recent disclosure of widespread cybersecurity breaches of both the private sector and government computer systems, federal courts are immediately adding new security procedures to protect highly sensitive, confidential documents filed with the courts. All of this was released. News came out January 6, 2021. A known compromise involving all sorts of different products hit, and we talked about some of this here on the channel. The Department of Homeland Security, they're doing a security audit and they're trying to figure out what happened. Okay, so that all took place some time ago. Now, Politico told us that there was a hearing that took place today. Many people were chiming in on this. Jackson Lee says, and she's from Texas, she's a Democrat. I mean, the Democrats are all over this. They say, I would expect your preparation for us to be able to get that information as quickly as possible to figure out what happened here. This is a dangerous set of circumstances that has now been publicly announced, and we need to know how many were, she said, dismissed. She might be talking about cases being dismissed. Senator Rod Wyden, he's a Democrat from Oregon. He said there are serious concerns the federal judiciary has hidden the consequences of the data breach from Congress and from the public. Okay. Now, I believe that 100%. Okay. This is one of those stories where if this happens, every single person except defense lawyers and defendants have an interest in covering this up. Every politician does, every prosecutor does, every judge does, right? Every single person does. Because if this gets out to one defense lawyer that there's a data breach and there's some compromised information or confidential stuff that got leaked out or it's floating around on the dark web somewhere, holy moly, right? That would be a catastrophe. So literally everybody would cover this. I could see this like this is a Hollywood thriller all over it, right? Everybody covers up this massive breach. We have 3 foreign actors who have hacked the federal court system. You know who's having a little birthday party in her cell today? You know, Ghislaine Maxwell. She's like, wait, what? What got hacked? Oh, the federal court system got hacked? And what does that mean for me? Did they go into my case file? Please tell me they went into my case file. She's very happy about that. Now, right here, many people are upset about this. The federal judiciary has yet to publicly explain what happened, and they have refused multiple requests to provide unclassified briefings to Congress. So the entire judiciary is like compromised. Louis Rosello, a Justice Department spokesperson, declined to comment on the case, while David Sellers, a spokesman for the U.S. court system, declined to comment beyond a statement that they put out in January 2021. And the FBI didn't respond to a comment either. All these people, nobody's talking about it. But all of this is, you know, they've confirmed it on the U.S. court's website, as we just went over and saw. Now, here is the actual statement that came out from, well, let me play this clip first. This is Matthew Olsen, and he gives us this is 4 minutes. We're not going to listen to the whole thing. But this is this guy. He talks about, this is his opening statement, and he talks about domestic violent extremism here before Chairman Nadler just comes out and hits him hard with the question right out of the gates. He said, hey, what about this hack? But let's listen to him just so we can refresh our recollection on who this guy is.
I would like to focus my opening statement on one of our top priorities, and that's counterterrorism.
Okay.
The country faces a persistent and dynamic threat from terrorism. This threat encompasses both foreign terrorist groups that seek to carry out attacks against the United States, as well as domestic violent extremists.
That's us. I think that's us. It's people who object to how the government handled COVID and stuff like that. Like if you object to government policies, I believe officially you are a DVE. So, I mean, unfortunately, that's bad news for many of you who listen to this program, but welcome to the club. So he's talking about foreign actors. As we know, there were 3 foreign actors who apparently hacked our court system.
Who are often mobilized to violence by racism and anti-government ideologies. International terrorism poses a continuing and evolving threat to the U.S., both at home and abroad. We keep an unwavering focus on violent jihadist groups, and we play an integral role in the broader all-of-government effort to defend against these threats. At the same time, the Department of Justice is committed to tackling the alarming threat at home from domestic violent extremism. Domestic violent extremists are individuals in the United States who seek to commit violent criminal acts in furtherance of domestic, social, or political goals. For example, we have seen a growing threat from those who are motivated by racism. We also see an increase in threats from extremists who espouse anti-government or anti-authority ideologies, and who often target those who participate in civil life, such as elected officials, police officers, and healthcare workers.
All right, so let's see what else he says.
The peaceful transfer of power.
Okay, yeah, so J6 stuff, yeah.
Our challenges when it comes to domestic extremism.
Still going about DVEs?
Terrorism investigations and prosecutions, working with our partners at the FBI and with U.S. attorneys' offices around the country. We recently established, as you noted, a dedicated domestic terrorism unit.
Yeah, we know. We covered that. He sat there with the FBI, Jill Sanborn, and Ted Cruz, asked them both, do you know anything about Ray Epps, this domestic violent extremist, you know, that was on the FBI's most wanted list? And Jill Sanborn from the FBI, I have a screenshot of it. She literally made this face. No, I don't know. She literally made that face, okay? You talk about body language. Now, I'm a very expressive person. I make some faces from time to time. But the point is, she's in a congressional hearing, and Ted Cruz says, you know who Ray Epps is? And she goes, no idea. No. Who? And made that face. We all go, you're so full of it, Jill. We know you know. All right, so here is Matthew Olsen now. They dedicated an entire branch after January 6th to this committee, to this hearing, or to this organization, the DVEs.
See and coordinate these cases across the department and around the country. Our domestic terrorism unit works very closely with the Civil Rights Division in the Department of Justice, which has prosecuted some of the most heinous terrorist attacks in recent years using our federal hate crime statutes.
Hate crimes.
Having spent 18 years myself as a career Department of Justice attorney and prosecutor, I know that our workforce is committed to the Constitution and to ensuring equal and impartial justice. We prosecute cases based on the facts and the law, without regard to ideology and politics.
Right.
Our national strength comes from our founding values.
Right.
These include the rule of law, freedom of speech, and freedom of association. And we will uphold these values as we safeguard the American people from threats to our safety and to our national security. I very much appreciate the opportunity to testify today, and I look forward to answering the committee's questions.
All right, so that's that guy, right? He's that guy. We spent a lot of time with him. Now, you know, he's a mover, okay? At the DOJ, you know, Merrick Garland is this very sort of, I think, milquetoast guy. He's just sort of this bland person who they just kind of move from room to room, not different than Joe Biden. But the people underneath him, the people who are really running the DOJ, Lisa Monaco and this guy, Matthew Olsen, they're the two people who are really moving the pieces around. Jill Sanborn over there, Christopher Wray right there. It's the FBI, so, you know, take that for what it's worth. But they are also, of course, you know, a huge part of the problem. But all of that is really kind of, you know, beside the point. Jerry Nadler didn't ask about any of that. You know, actually, all the Congress people came out today, and they took turns, and I have some other clips. They got into Hunter Biden. I'm not going to cover that today, but Matt Gaetz and Jim Jordan and a couples really got into the Hunter Biden story. I have that clip. We might get into that tomorrow. But here they are just starting this hearing off. And the first question out of the gates from the chairman, Jerry Nadler, is about this hack. And this, I was listening to this today and I'm go, what did he say? Did he just say 3 people hacked our entire federal court system? 3 foreign adversaries? What the heck is that?
We will now proceed under the 5-minute rule with questions. I will recognize myself for 5 minutes.
I recognize you too, Jerry. And Jerry just recognized himself, but let's all take a moment to recognize Jerry also, okay? You don't have to always recognize yourself. We recognize you, Jerry.
5-minute rule with questions. I will recognize myself for 5 minutes.
Please proceed.
On January 6th, 2021, the Administrative Office of the Courts released a public statement about a cybersecurity breach dating back to early 2020, unrelated to SolarWinds. However, it was only in March of this year that the committee first...
Only in March of this year. This took place in 2020. Now, he reads a statement, so I'm going to pause because these people are just like glazed over, you know, and so I'll pause to make sure we can really unpiece what's happening here. March, they just learned about this.
Learned the startling breadth and scope of the court's document management system security failure.
Okay, he said startling breadth and scope of the document management system failure.
And perhaps even more concerning is the disturbing impact the security breach had on pending civil and criminal litigation.
What?
As well as on ongoing national security or intelligence matters.
What?
Understanding that this is...
what? Okay, ongoing to pending criminal and civil cases, but also national security matters. Okay, so I don't know, like warrant requests and like FISA requests, like how deep does this go? Like the entire document management system? Like if they're getting warrants on foreign surveillance, are these foreign countries checking the court docket and saying, oh, darn it. Oh, hey, MBS, Mohammed bin Salman from Saudi Arabia. Here's what they've got on you. They've got this guy and this guy and this guy and this guy. They've all got warrants on them. All their phones are tapped. How do you know? Oh, well, we hacked the federal court system. Oh, well, and that's pretty amazing. Like for real. And he says, yeah, no, seriously. Like, here, I'll show you. Yeah, here's the docket. Here, just type in your name. Here are all the warrants that exist. Yeah, they've tapped all these phones. Holy what? So that kind of makes you go, wait a minute, that's okay. And he's just dropping this out in public?
This is an unclassified setting. What types of cases or investigations or U.S. attorneys' offices were impacted the most by this breach? And how many of those cases and investigations are within your division?
Chairman, let me begin by just saying that the threat we face from cyber-enabled attacks, whether that's to the government and the public sector, including Congress, and to the private sector, is one of the most significant threats we face as a country to our national security. For the National Security Division, we are focused on nation-state attacks. And those attacks can come from countries like China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea.
China, Russia, Iran, North Korea. So Nads just asked him about the 3 potential foreign actors who apparently hacked our court system, and he named Russia, China, Iran, and others.
Well, I can't speak directly to the nature of the ongoing investigation of the types of threats that you've mentioned regarding the effort to compromise the public judicial dockets. This is, of course, a significant concern for us, given the nature of the information that is often held by the courts.
Whoa.
Have any cases or investigations within the NSD been materially impacted, prolonged, or dismissed because of the court's breach?
Has anything happened? Okay, the court was breached. Any cases dismissed, any data leaked, any like consequential information that changed the course of a case? Oh, man.
I can't think of anything in particular that's been affected in the way that you describe, although I would want to double check on that. We are very concerned, and we're working, I can assure you, based on my own personal experience, that we're working very closely with the Judicial Conference and judges around the country to address this issue.
Judges around the country to address this issue. I don't even know what that means. Like, data leaked, cases dismissed, discovery violations. I mean, there are really catastrophic problems. Like if a system breaches a defendant's constitutional rights, right? I'm arguing all day. I don't care how that happened. I don't care if Russia hacked your court system, federal government. You think I give a crap about that at all? Pardon my language. No, I don't care. It's our client's constitutional rights. I don't care if your power went out. Whatever happened. It's immutable, my friends. So if, let's say Kim Jong-il went into, the court docket and they just moved a deadline back 6 months. And now, the defense attorney, a defense attorney's not going to bring this up. A defense attorney's going to sit there and go, they made a mistake. There's going to be a right to a speedy trial violation real soon here. They just sit on their butts and nothing happens. And then when the actual violation becomes ripe and prejudicial, then they drop the hammer on it and boom, case is dismissed. And now the prosecutor and the judge are going, well, I don't know how that happened. And everybody is trying to cover it up because nobody wants to be responsible for that. And nobody's going to come out and say, we just breached a bunch of people's constitutional rights, or we leaked the filings for all of our criminal defendants, or, like, what if this was gang related, all the like MS-13, or I don't know what has been disclosed. It's insane. It's one of the most insane things I've heard as a practicing lawyer. I mean, it's nuts.
Thank you. Has the department or NSD audited your own systems to ensure that you were not compromised by the same 3 hostile foreign actors?
3 hostile foreign actors
who attacked the document management system?
It's an ongoing effort to ensure the protection of our systems for the exact same reason. But I would say that the challenge when it comes to the sophisticated nation-state type activity that we see inside.
Okay, so my initial thought was these were nation states, right? 3 foreign actors, 3 foreign nations. But then it sounded like maybe it was 3 foreign actors, like just 3 people, like 3 foreign nationals from a country. And then he goes back with this answer, and then he talks about nation states again, right? So now it sort of sounds like these might be nation state endorsed attacks on the U.S. federal document managed system for all of our courts.
Address this issue.
Thank you. Has the department or NSD audited your own systems to ensure that you were not compromised by the same 3 hostile foreign actors who attacked the document management system?
It's an ongoing effort to ensure the protection of our systems for the exact same reason. But I would say that the challenge when it comes to the sophisticated nation-state type activity that we see in cyber, the challenge is significant, and it's very difficult to ever be in a position to say that any system is 100% safe when it comes to sophisticated nation-states that seek to obtain persistent access to these systems.
That sounds to me like 3 foreign countries hacked our entire federal court system. And I don't even know what the consequences of that are. And you're probably not going to hear much about it. I think these types of stories, the worse they are, the less you'll hear about it. Because the last thing that anybody wants is for people to lose faith in the system, especially the justice system. If you could intertwine, reasonable doubt into the system itself, okay, not about the case, right? Defense attorneys are making reasonable doubt about the case. But the system, that, oh my gosh, they cannot handle that. That they fight tooth and nail to make sure that you don't jeopardize the system. And that's why if you get a bad officer, they're sort of sidelined. If you get a bad criminalist, somebody who tests blood in a crime lab, right, they're all sidelined. If they're really bad, they're sort of, they can't get hired anymore because defense attorneys will say the system is broken. They've got to protect the integrity of the system. So if a foreign or 3 foreign nation states jeopardize the entire federal court system, they are not going to let you talk about that. I can't believe they're openly talking about it right now.
The department's 2022 comprehensive cyber review concluded that DOJ, quote, needs to consider carefully what data it collects, both the lawfulness of the sources and the veracity of the data itself, close quote. As we heard last week during our digital dragnets hearing, unreliable or unverified data, often purchased through commercially available third-party sources, can lead to incorrect identification, wrongful arrests, and costly litigation for innocent parties. Under the Brady rule, prosecutors have a constitutional duty to disclose potentially...
Okay, so he's getting into a different question about Brady, and so we'll leave it there, but my goodness, very, very strange story that the U.S. federal court system was hacked, it sounds like, by 3 foreign actors. And the consequences of this are yet to be determined. We'll see. Jerry Nadler's asking about it. A lot of other Democrats are asking about it. And I fully support, an investigation to learn more, because who knows who hacked who and what types of data they got. And really, if they move the needles around, or if they turn the dials ever so slightly, it may be enough to cause real repercussions throughout the entire justice system. And we'll see if there is anything more that comes out about it. I think everybody involved has a very strong interest in sweeping that right under the rug. All right, and we've got one final segment today before we jump into your super chats. And I see some coming in from Rebel the Waist from the Waist Down. Mark Owens is here. Tara Raynar. Thank you all for supporting the work that we're doing. We've got one more segment left, and then we're going to get into your comments. And of course, we'll check out the locals' comments as well. Take a quick water break here. And then we've got a big tech censorship lawsuit coming up. And we're just, we're sort of bouncing around different stories. We'll do some heavy lifting, some legal heavy lifting today for this final segment. But this is an interesting lawsuit. I'd love to see this actually go somewhere, because it's about big tech censorship. And you can see we've got the Dr. Fauci, who was somebody who was really encouraging a lot of the big tech companies to censor people. Missouri versus Biden, the big tech censorship lawsuit is well underway. This was something that got filed back in May, and I wasn't real sure if this was going to have any legs, and it looks like it does. We actually see that on the 12th, just about 2 weeks ago, there was a discovery order from the judge that said the states are entitled to learn more from these social media companies about their censorship collusion with guys like Dr. Fauci, with guys like the CDC, with guys like the DHS, to sort of craft a narrative on social media to serve them in a way that implicates constitutional rights, free speech, and your right to participate in American life. And so we've got a lot to get to. As I mentioned, this involves Dr. Fauci and many others. I want to share with you just the actual complaint, because it's a pretty interesting complaint. And I actually opened this up on our PDF viewer that allows us to draw on this puppy. And so let's get this thing queued up. As you can see, Number of people are listed in this. And you see some pretty big names on here. Joe Biden. Oh, yeah, he's the president. Oh, Jen Psaki. She's here, along with Vivek Murthy, Surgeon General of the United States. Xavier Becerra, of course, Department of Health and Human Services. There he is, Dr. Fauci, over from the NIAID, National Institute for Infectious Diseases. Alejandro Mayorkas, over from Department of Homeland Security. Jen Easterly. And guess who this is? Nina Jankowicz. Remember Jankowicz? She was over at the Disinformation Governance Board, and she was somebody who was part of sort of that censorship cabal. All of them named as defendants in this lawsuit. It's a fairly decently sized lawsuit, 84 pages. I'm going to just hit the highlights on this, and then I want to show you the discovery order. So sort of remember what's happening here. There's a complaint. This is the very first document that starts the whole lawsuit off, and it's from Missouri and Louisiana. So shout outs to our friends in Missouri and Louisiana through their attorney generals, Schmidt and Landry. They're suing all the Biden people, and they're saying, look, you colluded and you censored free speech in America, and that's illegal. They write, in 1783, George Washington warned us that, quote, if freedom of speech may be taken away, then dumb and silent we may be led like sheep to the slaughter. He said that to the officers of the Army back on March 15th, 1783. The freedom of speech in the United States now faces one of its greatest assaults by the federal government in our nation's history. And they cite some case law over from the Supreme Court case from 2021. They say, over the last several years, beginning with express and implied threats from government officials, culminating in the Biden administration's open and explicit censorship programs, these have threatened and cajoled media companies for years to censor viewpoints and speakers disfavored by the left. They say senior government officials in the executive branch have moved into a phase of open collusion, obviously, with social media companies to suppress disfavored speakers, viewpoints, and content on social media platforms under the Orwellian guise of halting disinformation, misinformation, and malinformation. And obviously, right, like we've been the subject of that here. You've seen a lot of it. You've heard me rail against it because this channel in particular, you know, I'm trying to make some changes on this channel just to show you, or just to sort of see if we can pop outside of the little bubble that they put around us, because none of our stuff shows up in search. It's very, very limited in terms of its recommendations to other people. So thank you for sharing this with people and inviting them to come join us on our live show. But right, they craft the conversation. Now they're being sued for it. It says here, the aggressive censorship that the defendants, meaning Psaki and Fauci and Biden and all those people, that they have procured, they say it constitutes government action. Okay, it is the government. Many people on the left, they say, well, they're private companies. Facebook can do whatever they want. And Twitter and YouTube, they can do whatever they want. But there's a distinction in our law. It's called government action. When the government is sort of encouraging private individuals to do things at the behest of the government, it's kind of like the government is doing the thing, right? They can't outsource all of this stuff to private actors. And they give us 5 reasons. They say, look, absent federal intervention, well, we'll skip all of those. You get the point that they're trying to make. They say defendants' campaign of censorship from the Bidens has finally culminated with the creation of the Disinformation Governance Board. Janky old Jankowicz saying this is like Oceana's Ministry of Truth, saying our Constitution stands against the Disinformation Governance Board, and as a direct result of all of these changes that came out of the Biden administration, we have an unprecedented rise of censorship and a suppression of free speech, including core political speech on social media platforms, which is so obvious. They banned the president of the United States from social media. The sitting president banned not just fringe views, but perfectly legitimate, responsible viewpoints, and speakers have been unlawfully and unconstitutionally silenced in the modern public square. Point I've been screaming about here for a long time, right? There is no place to go out and debate in the public square, especially when you lock us all in our homes. These types of restrictions gravely threaten the fundamental right of free speech and free discourse for all citizens in Missouri, Louisiana, and America on social media and elsewhere. And so you can see, right, the rest of this is going to give us a lot of legalese, and we'll just scroll all the way to the bottom and see if we can see what the conclusion is going to point us to before we get to our certificate of service. And so there it is. Count all the different counts that they're charging them with. Here's the prayer for relief, right? They want the court to declare that the conduct of the Biden administration violates the First Amendment and the state constitutions, and declare that their conduct is outside the scope of the law, outside the scope of their power. Declare the defendant and their conduct violates the APA, which we actually talked about yesterday in the other case, the transgender lawsuit case, and preliminarily and permanently enjoin all of these people from engaging in their conduct moving forward, signed off on by the two attorneys general and their sort of deputies, filed now out of the district court. So all of that is a interesting lawsuit, and I think it makes a very astute point. And so what happened, if you actually go over to the court docket, the way this stuff works is you file a lawsuit and then they file a response, and there's a back and forth. But ultimately, both sides, even in criminal cases, they want to get to what's called discovery. You may have seen this and heard about this in other cases that you followed. If we can just get to discovery and see what they've got in there, then we'll be able to really see some interesting things. Here now, we were fighting over that. These states, they want discovery, right? They want this to happen, and they want it now. And the defense, or here, this is the government, this is the states versus the feds. So it's the plaintiffs are the states who say this censorship was illegal versus the government who says, no, we can do whatever we want. This order came out just about 2 weeks ago, and we just set dates on all of this literally recently. And we've got deadlines coming up. Yeah, okay. So let me show you this. On the 12th, we had this official ruling that came out from the judge. The judge's name is Kayla McCluskey and Judge Terry Doughty. They are out of the Western District of Louisiana. And here's what they say. This is a discovery order. Look at this. Granted, the plaintiff's motion, the plaintiff's state's motion for expedited preliminary discovery is granted in accordance with the schedule set forward. So that's like a big whoa. That's a big win right there. You're going, whoa. I almost have a Jill Sanborn face. Whoa. That's crazy. They're going to actually grant this. So they're going to say that the states have a right to go get discovery from the Fauci and the Facebook. What? Those conversations? That's crazy. But it's true. It's real. Here, let's take a look at this. It says, this is coming from the judge. So the judge writes, okay, look, all these motions are filed. The complaint has been already submitted. And now there's a back and forth about discovery. The defense, the government, the feds, they don't want to give any of that stuff over, of course. And so they're sort of, fighting this. So the judge says, all right, children, sit down. I've made my ruling. Comes out and says, before this court is a motion for expedited discovery filed by Missouri and Louisiana, the states. They want those documents. And an opposition was filed on July 1st by the feds. Reply came out from the states July 7th. And for the reasons set forth, I am granting the state's motion. Meaning they're going to get some discovery on this thing. I'm going to show you what they're going to get. And it sounds pretty good so far. But here's the background. The judge says on May 5th, the plaintiffs filed a complaint. That's the states, right? Louisiana and Missouri, they filed against the government. We already covered that, but the court summarizes this for us nicely. They say in the complaint, the plaintiff states say the government defendants have colluded with and or coerced social media companies to suppress disfavored speakers, viewpoints, and other content on social media. They say that this suppression was a violation of the First Amendment of the Constitution and all the different states' rights. They say all of these people are involved. Look at all these names. Biden, Psaki, Murthy, Becerra, Fauci, Mayorkas, Easterly, and the janky of the jankies, Nina Jankowicz. The complaint, says the judge, further alleges that the plaintiff states have created a disinformation governance board within the Department of Homeland Security to use, label, and pressure censorship of disfavored content. Obviously, they created that, right? We saw it. Like Mayorkas was sitting there answering questions about it. So in the complaint, the states, they give us several examples of the suppression of free speech, right? Here's a list, 4 of them easy. Number 1, the Hunter Biden laptop story prior to the 2020 presidential election, obviously suppressed. Speech about the lab leak theory of the COVID-19 origin, obviously suppressed. Speech about the efficiency of masks and the lockdown, suppressed. Your boy got suspended from YouTube for a week over that crap and thrown off Discord. Speech about election integrity and security of voting by mail, right? That's the one that got us booted off of that garbage chat platform. And it is a lot of misinformation and disinformation that has been spread around all over the place at the hands of the government. But the point is they're censoring oppositional viewpoints. So the states, the judge says the states set forth specific government defendants and the actions that they have taken to suppress free speech, right? They went through that in their 87-page complaint. The states say that free speech is the bedrock of American liberty and that the government defendants are in violation of the First Amendment. They say that they are suppressing free speech by labeling it as misinformation, which is obvious. That's the whole point. It's being labeled that way, obviously, right? So the states now seek to enforce the plaintiff states' own laws and the constitutions on behalf of themselves and on behalf of their citizens. We're fighting to enforce our own rights since you're not even doing it. And they go through, we've got 4 counts. We say First Amendment violation by all government defendants, statutory authority exceeded against all government defendants, violation of the APA by Health and Human Services, and violation of the APA by the Department of Homeland Security. On June 14th, then, plaintiffs, they filed a motion for a preliminary injunction. They wanted to prohibit the government from taking steps to demand, urge, and encourage or otherwise induce social media companies to censor, we've been that, suppress, yep, got that one, remove, done, deplatformed, done, suspended, yep, shadow banned, yep, deboosted, restrict access to content or other adverse action against any speaker, content, or viewpoint expressed on social media. We've got it all, baby. On June 17th, the plaintiffs filed a motion for preliminary injunction, and the response was filed again. So they go through some law and analysis, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. But the government says that the court doesn't have jurisdiction because the plaintiffs don't have standing. But they say, yeah, they do. The court must determine whether they do have standing. And she says there is, in fact, an injury, it looks like. They have standing to regulate the enforcement of their laws. There's a traceable link here. There is redressability. So these are all sort of the standard preliminary questions in order to sustain a lawsuit. Now here, they're going through some other case law, and the judge gives us this conclusion. She says, if Missouri and Louisiana do not have standing under these facts, when could anyone ever have standing to address these claims? Therefore, they must have standing. In conclusion, the court finds the plaintiffs do have standing and that the court does have power to hear this case, right? So a lot of like the Trump lawsuits all got dismissed on standing. Here, the judge gives us about 9 pages of analysis and says there is standing. So now, right, since they can bring their lawsuit and this thing is not going to be immediately dismissed, plaintiffs state, and the states are seeking an order now allowing the expedited discovery. So they want that stuff quickly, right? They want all this stuff now. And the courts are going through this, talking about expedited discovery, saying it's not usually the norm. You know, normally we go slowly on this thing. We don't sort of urge people to like pick up the pace on disclosure, like get your disclosure in according to the rules. They're asking for this to go faster. But now they have to ask themselves, should we grant this? In the motion, the states are saying that they want stuff from the social media companies. Here's what they want. Targeted interrogatories. So interrogatories are like a set of questions, sort of like a big list of questions. Targeted lists of questions and document requests to the government defendants requesting the identities of federal officials who are or have been communicating with social media platforms. Ooh, this is juicy. About disinformation, misinformation, malinformation, or any form of censorship or online suppressed speech. Okay, that's juicy as can be. That means that the state attorney generals are going to be able to assemble a big list of stuff and send it right over to Zuckerberg and his people and say, who are you talking to over there? Targeted interrogatories, serve third-party subpoenas, and all of that. The court then, right, that's their proposal. So the court is going to determine whether there's good cause or not. And they give us some of their analysis. Each one of these is sort of like a tier of analysis, right? So the judge is saying, well, what's the purpose of this expedited discovery? Why do you need this, states? And they say, well, the purpose is to gain additional evidence to prove allegations that they are bringing forward in their pending motion for a preliminary injunction. So the proposed discovery is tailored to what they are seeking. Therefore, it is not a fishing expedition, and the judge is going to grant it. So now we see exactly what the judge is going to flesh out for us. Okay, this is where it's being granted. Although there is certainly a, quote, need for speed, the judge puts that in quotes, very fun judge, for discovery related to a preliminary injunction, the plaintiffs state that the proposed schedule is too fast. Therefore, the plaintiff state's proposed schedule is too fast. So the judge is saying, okay, look, states, you really want this stuff and you want it like quickly. Okay, it's a little too quick, but you're right. We can pick this up a bit. The court adopts the following schedule for the expedited discovery and or motion. All right, so this means now that the judge is granting this. Within 5 business days after this ruling, the plaintiff states, so Missouri and Louisiana, they may serve interrogatories and document requests upon the government defendants, third-party subpoenas, check this out, on up to 5 major social media platforms. Oh, that is so good. Oh, 5 major social media platforms. Within 5 business days, the states may serve interrogatories upon 5 major social media platforms seeking the identity of federal officials who have been and are communicating with the social media companies about disinfo, misinfo, malinfo, any censorship, any suppression, and the nature and the contents of those communications. Oh, that's just outstanding. That's just amazing. So that means that those 2 attorney generals are going to go. They're probably typing them up right now. They're just tap dancing away on the keyboard. Just going hard. Within 30 days, now here's where this gets a little bit, interesting. Okay, within 30 days of the plaintiff state discovery request, responses and objections shall be provided by the government defendants. Okay, so they're going to send over the list. It's like a grocery list. I want all of these things. And they're going to say, you can't have those. No, you don't get, the double stuffed Oreos. Okay, take it easy. You're not getting those. And the judge says, yeah, you really don't need those. Okay, so putting those back. Within 10 days following receipt of the objections, the parties shall meet and confer about the disputes. 7 days after that, the court's going to rule on the objections. 10 days after that, we're going to have production of the responses. 7 days after that, the parties are going to meet again, and so on and so forth. Plaintiffs are then going to have 30 days to take any authorized depositions. Oh, and within 20 days after that, states are going to supplement their memos, and we're going to have supplemental memos, and then we're going to have a reply. In the due course, the court will now rule on the plaintiff's motion for a preliminary injunction. Conclusion entered on July. Terry Doughty, U.S. District Judge. And you go, whoo, all right. Okay, that sounds pretty good. Pretty good there, Judge. Now, as this happened, take a look at this filing that came in over from the defendants. So same day, take a look at this one. Okay, on July 12th, same day that the order came out, on 7/12, the judge ordered, give them those documents. On the 12th, the defendants, so this one is the defendants' motion, the defendants, Joe Biden, Psaki, Fauci, all those people, they filed a motion to dismiss for a lack of subject matter jurisdiction and failure to state a claim, right? Now they're saying, okay, we want a dismissal because they shouldn't have even brought this lawsuit to begin with. Now, I'm not going to go through this in its entirety. It is a whopper of a motion. Let me see. It's 79 pages. But let me just show you kind of the table of contents so you can get the highlights of this. This to me means that they are freaked out. Okay, they're panicked. They want this case dismissed. They do not want to go through this discovery process. They do not. There's a federal judge that just ordered Facebook to give the names of all the people that they were colluding with from the government, all of them. So the government is now going, that's not good. We want a motion to dismiss this puppy. And they filed that the same day the order came out, probably because they knew the order was coming out. And they say, look, for years, the background, this is their argument. It's 65 pages. It's like a, small pamphlet here. But they say the separation of powers doctrine requires dismissal of the president from this action. Okay, boot the president off of this. The state fails to state a claim, says that there is no First Amendment claim here. There isn't even coercion or similar degree of encouragement, right? They can't prove any of this stuff. And they can't make the allegations that are needed to sort of properly plead this case forward. They say social media companies have sought to contain content on their platform that they identify as misinformation. Various branch officials have spoken about the harmful effects of this. And basically that they're entitled to do this, right? So a big dismissal order. Now, we don't have a ruling on it because we're not going to get another. So here's the final order that came out from the judge setting deadlines. The motion to dismiss for a lack of jurisdiction that we just read through. We have a response to the motion that's due on August 3rd, 7 days after that. And then the judge is just going to rule. Now, take a look at this. In this court, there's going to be a ruling without oral arguments even on this case. So there's no oral arguments. Put it in your brief. That's it. So the state attorney generals now are responding to this motion, right? So this is a very important motion. This is their basis for the dismissal. The judge, and it's 79 pages. I don't think, you can see it up there, 79 pages. And the judge is going to be asking the states to respond to this, and we'll see what the ruling is. But won't be any oral arguments. Sometime maybe mid-August, we'll see if this case is dismissed. Otherwise, we may see some pretty interesting discovery come out from these defendants, meaning the government and all of the social media companies. They're not named as defendants, the social media companies, but they are the people that have the names of who they were talking with. Was it Fauci? Was it Fauci's staff? Was it Jen Psaki herself? Was Joe Biden in there? Instant messaging away? Who knows? But hopefully we get some good answers. I would love to know who is behind it all. Now, my friends, it is time to hear from you. And we're going to jump into your questions and your comments over from watchingthewatchers.locals.com. But I had some super chats come in early on in the show. Bear Ashby says, all them clowns belong in straitjackets. Yeah, and I think that was all the comment, all the recession conversation that keeps flip-flopping because people pick the definitions that serve them. Thank you, Bear. Good to see you. John McGarvey is in the house. Shout out to John McGarvey. We've got Glenn Tallman says, great job, Robert. Very happy to make your live broadcast. Thank you, Glenn. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you made it. I know that sometimes the show is half an hour late or half an hour early, and so I'm glad you made it. Sometimes it can be a little bit squirrely, but I appreciate your understanding there. John McGarvey says, I heard an unsubstantiated rumor that the Twitter stock is going to tank on discovery. I wouldn't want to be holding that stock. This is not financial advice. Thank you for putting that in parentheses. I may have forgotten to say that. Yeah, Twitter. The Twitter one we haven't looked at yet. Should we cover Elon and Twitter? I have to create an account to go into the Delaware Court of Chancery to get all the documents. I haven't done that yet, but maybe I'll go do that so that we can talk about it here because I think it's an interesting case, certainly, and it may be well worth it. Bear Ashby says, Biden has a rescue plan for China. It seems like, well, they're getting a lot of our oil, that's for sure. Tara Rayner says, the jobs aren't newly created, in my opinion. They are the jobs on hold during the lockdowns and mandates returning. Unemployment numbers are only showing anyone able to collect insurance, LOL. So deceitful. It is. I mean, the numbers, the recession numbers are some of the most ridiculous. Everybody just picks the numbers that serves them. And it is disappointing when it's so obvious. They can't even own it. But how are you going to own it? How can you possibly own it and say, yeah, it is a recession. Things are bad. Joe Biden comes out. I know it's terrible. You can't do that. So he has to just lie about it. is how it goes. It's politics. We had another one from Mark Owens. Thank you, Mark, with the handshake. Thank you, Mark. Right back at you, my friend. Another one from Rebel from the Waist Down. He says, why are the White House staffers really wearing masks 24/7? What are they hiding? Is there a monkeypox outbreak in the White House? Get to the bottom of this now. It's not in the White House. I think it's in San Francisco. And there was actually, didn't they declare a national or health citywide emergency? I think they did today. And the World Health Organization did too. It's becoming the new pandemic for some reason. We'll see where that one goes. Strange Rebel from the Waist. Some of those people, I think it's just a comfort thing. It's sort of like a pacifier for a child. You know, if you take it out, they don't like that. So they just keep the mask on. Yeah. And Bear Ashby says, there goes the evidence on Hunter and Joe. It must be all the court hacking. China wiped all of it out, all of their nefariousness. Breakdance Express says, yet another example of a critical information system that has no business being actively connected to the greater internet. We have ways to fix this. I'm sure we do. You know, there's a lot of smart people out there that have very secure systems in place. And I've been, you know, very critical of the infrastructure in the legal system for a long time. And, you know, I say they're 20 years behind everybody. And I think that's probably an understatement, to be honest. I mean, we still have courts that only accept ink signatures. You have to put it in the mail. Okay. Like put it in the mail to send it to them. Can I just fax it to you? No. Can I email it to you? No. Can I scan it to you? No. There are courts that still fax in Arizona. Can I email it to you? No, it's a fax. Okay, well, I'm going to just use an online scan to fax company that's going to put it into a fax number and send it to you. Can I just email it to you? You have an email? No. You have to fax it. Okay. Good Lord. You know, so yeah, Breakdance Express. I mean, that stuff really goes on in the justice system. So yeah, the fact that an entire infrastructure got hacked, not a surprise at all. But I'm curious to see where it goes. I'm not optimistic that we're going to learn more about it, but I certainly would like to, given the work that we do. All right, and we're jumping over to locals, my friend, over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Let's see what we have in here today. We've got John McGarvey says, forced destruction checklist. Inflation? Check. Recession? Check. Vote to avoid the next two. Stagflation and depression. It's a good call. We got some serious elections coming up very soon. Jeff Rook is here, says, every record has been destroyed or falsified, every book rewritten, every picture has been repainted, every statute, street renamed, every date altered. Process is continuing day by day, minute by minute. History is stopped. Nothing exists except an endless present in which the party is always right. And that came as a response to this comment from former LEO. He says, let me get this straight anymore. I'm confused. Groomer isn't a groomer anymore. Recession isn't a recession. Hunter isn't a crackhead. Up is down, down is up. Biden the unifier is a dumpster fire. Democrats are honest. Democrats are criminals. The media is fair, balanced. FBI trustworthy. FBI disbanded. Inquisition. J6 Inquisition is the search for the truth. Sussman is not guilty. Bannon is guilty. I can go on and on and on. It is insanity. TOS Forever says, top of the Thursday to everybody. Shout out to TOS. Rational Gay says, can you do a video on the Baker Act? I keep wondering why these laws haven't been used against mass shooters, especially so many of these other people. Nicholas Cruz was the first example. He was in Florida. These laws accomplish the same thing as red flag laws, except the Baker Act respects due process. I think a lot of your viewers would be interested. Yeah. Yeah, I suppose I could do that. You know, there was was Nicholas Cruz, was he the Parkland shooter? I think he's in sentencing right now. You know, and I've been thinking about covering some of those other cases. So yes, thank you for that, Rational Gaze. I am interested in other topics. As I said, I'm sort of trying to, you know, when we get trials, like it's very easy to cover a trial, but when it's not trial season, it's either like politics or what, I don't know. And so like Nicholas Cruz, Baker Act, that's good stuff. So I'll keep that in mind. And I appreciate that thought, Rational Gaze. Jeff Rook says, there is no recession. I don't know what that is, Jeff Rook, but thank you for it. I'll have to educate is that from, I don't know what it's from. So it scares me. So I don't say things where I don't know it's from. All right, we're doing a quick refresh on this one. Let's see. And then here from former LEO, he says, senators have been in the government for too long and they don't understand what fiduciary duty is. Board of directors and corporations maximize investments for shareholders. Cost of doing business increases. That means that they have to adjust and protect shareholders. Plain and simple, more tax is higher prices to the consumer and therefore more inflation. It's not rocket surgery, but someone with a brain should explain it to the Senate and to the voters. Yeah, I mean, it's not rocket surgery, I don't think, but they have to solve things, right? This is all they do is they just pass money around. They just move pieces around. It's musical chairs. Sergeant Bob says, all Biden smoke and mirrors. I think it was Humpty Dumpty that said, oh, a word shall mean exactly what I say it means, neither more nor less. And they say President Trump lied. Ha. It's good. Gets a good one from Sergeant Bob. Shout out to Sergeant Bob. Miss Lucky says, how would Jake from Oxford define recession? That's a good question. Maybe he'll show up. Says, guess what, JP? Most all cops despise Biden and his puppeteers, from Sergeant Bob in the house. Jeff Rook says, I'm going to lose it if they keep talking about the strong labor market. Even the right likes saying that at least one good thing. The job market is strong because everyone's desperate for employees. I spoke with a contractor who told me half the guys on his team would have been fired 3 years ago, but he can't find anyone else. It doesn't matter if you can find a job. There are no products or services to your paycheck on. Any chance we're just the 50% who survived the Thanos snap? I don't know. Maybe. Maybe. I don't know. Was COVID the one that sort of, took everybody into the... That's a morbid thought. Former LEO says, I guess that he can't tell the press secretary that she is not... Okay, from former. Miss Lucky says, the hikers were on the right path. Sleepy Joe says we were on the right path. They followed their electronic map device and they marched off the cliff. Let's keep going, Brandon. We can all follow you off the cliff like lemmings. Sergeant Bob says, Sleepy Joe told us he's not going to raise taxes. Sorry for posting so much. I'm beside myself. I was just going to say, Sergeant Bob, I can tell you're on one tonight because you got like 4 back-to-back. Says, I'm besides myself. P.S. It's monsooning in Chino Valley. Awesome. So on our morning walk and talk, we had we got light sprinkling here in Phoenix earlier this morning. It was enough that I didn't walk around in it, but it was, it's beautiful. Jeff Rook says, if I were to falsify small numbers at my job, the entire company could be investigated and sued into oblivion for lying to investors. Have you seen any legal principle put forward as justification for suing the government over this behavior? No. I mean, you have to vote. That's it. That's the mechanism. You can't sue them. Yeah, there's no general grievance right. I understand government needs a level of immunity to function. Have you heard of even just attempted case of suing the government for essentially false advertising? Yes, so that is true. Yeah, there's all sorts of... You can sue the government, but you've got to have actual harm, right? You've got to be somebody who is it can't be a general government grievance. And especially on something that's sort of a spending concern, right? They have total ability to spend money. Sadly, I'm pretty confident I know the answer, but I'm curious if it's still a debate of topic in legal circles. No, not really a subject of debate. It's pretty well settled, I'd say. Look, you can sue the government. For example, if prisoners sue, our law firm doesn't help with this, but a prisoner, right? If they are, let's say, if they need medical attention and they don't get medical attention, yes, they can sue their government because they suffered a direct harm at the hands of the government. But us as citizens, if you look at Congress and you just say, wait a minute, how many tens of billions did they just send over to Ukraine? What? And you say, I want to sue them for that. I never voted for that. Nobody ever voted for that. This is all ridiculous. They just laugh you right out of court. Vote. They say, go vote. Go run for office. You don't like it? Go run for office. Sergeant Bob says, do not show Nadler's diaper. It must be overwhelming. I know. Normally Nadler is walking around with 35 pounds. He's probably 34 pounds since he dropped that giant one on us today. Lawyers like Olsen give lawyers a bad name. Thank you for being a good one. I know. Matthew Olsen is a slippery little slipper. TOS Forever tells us, Rob, might the judicial system hack may have been some foreigner who walked over the border and voted unconstitutionally against Bannon for the sus man? You're cramming a lot of memes in there, TOS Forever. Miss Lucky says Olsen's nose is growing exponentially. Miss Lucky also says, Sergeant Bob says, I kind of miss the old Popo discussions, but clearly our country is under much greater threats. The old Popo discussions? Yeah, I mean, we could definitely get back into some old Popo discussions. Yeah, I mean, there's been some shootings and there's been some. We can do that. Those are fun videos, certainly. China, second issue, if they can hack in the judicial records, can they set up elections? I don't know. I mean, if they can get into the entire judicial system that feels like it's probably supposed to be pretty secure. Oh, Jake's here from Oxford. He says, Rob, and to Sergeant Bob. Just to give you an update on a recession, it's now defined as, here you go, here, perfect. It's defined as 17 consecutive quarters with no growth, but also includes no homeless people in California and Oregon, as in 0. Therefore, we're not going to be in a recession until we have 17 quarters of no growth. And 17 divided by 4, I mean, that's going to be like 4. So that's interesting. So that's going to be at the end of Joe Biden's term, then it can be recession time, but not until that moment. It's very, very smart. Thank you, Jake. Miss Lucky says, I don't like much. Sergeant Bob says, I don't much like more government, but it may be time to treat the big tech as a public utility. Don't know the process, but there may be an idea there somewhere. I like the idea that they are, that the First Amendment is a base layer, that they can't drop below that. And I think there's different implementations, but the same, a lot of this framework has already been articulated in courts. We just apply it to technology. Zach Nichols says, I just wanted to drop that LinkedIn link for anybody who may be interested. Yeah, Zach shared that one. So thank you for putting it in there. Another one discussing how Amazon, Apple are not feeling the burden of inflation like the rest of us are feeling. Ugh. I wonder why that is. Thank you, Zach Nichols. Thunder 7 says, great news about the censorship lawsuit, but I don't think anyone could sue a sitting president. What gives? So I think you can, I don't know about civil suits. You can't indict, in my opinion, a sitting president. I think there's still debate about that, but actually, I don't know about that. Maybe that's why they're asking for him to be removed. C-Ro says, hey, Rob, how do you think this lawsuit plays out? On the one hand, we have Thomas talking about finding big tech as common carriers like in Biden versus Knight. Then on the other hand, we have a ton of precedent holding that they are private companies, not beholden to the Constitution. I know there's been clear collusion between big tech and the White House, but how do you think the whole ordeal will shake out? Not well for all of us. I think that you're going to see more probably muddled waters there. I think that the big tech companies are going to become more censorial. They're going to censor harder. They're going to feel like they're losing, audiences, and there's going to be more pressure from both sides. I honestly think that most people in the government are okay with more censorship. And the alternatives are going to be things that are censorship resistant and sort of mooted or anchored in being censorship resistant. Of course, I'm talking about blockchain. So I really think the solution is not going to come from the courts. The Supreme Court, I don't know how they would go on this case if it worked its way all the way up. I'd like to think they'd side on the side of free speech, but I don't know about that. Sergeant Bob says, good on Missouri. Glad it was not heard in D.C. Thunder 7 says, Trump was right about everything. He called out the fake news 6 years ago in the corrupt media as another arm of the DNC. They've been out of control ever since. All reps, all Trump supporters, we've developed our own platforms. Put a fork in the mainstream media. They're done. I hope so. They're garbage. Jeff Rook says, you can't be pro-insurrection and pro-American, which is what Joe Biden said yesterday, saying these people jabber on with platitudes about protecting America and our Constitution. Meanwhile, they openly admit it's their goal to get rid of the first 2 amendments. If I was a more excitable man, I'd maybe start to feel a little bit upset about all this nonsense, is what Jeff Rook says. Well, Jeff, the good news is you are a fortress of controlled emotion. Impenetrable. It's good for all of us. Miss Lucky and Sergeant Bob say figures don't lie, but liars figure. Very astute. And former LEO says the last big epidemic we shut down. Former LEO. All right. So we're going to do a quick refresh over here and see what else is here before we wrap it up on the day. Yeah, and there's a couple more that came in. Sergeant Bob says, thank you, Jake. And former LEO says, Sergeant Bob is on fire, baby. The Veil says, hey, Rob, you haven't had your monsoons yet in Arizona? Man, miss those. I mean, I haven't gotten like a hard monsoon yet this summer, which is a bummer. Just light sprinkles. You've seen some of it on the Walk and Talks. So with the judicial hacks, does this mean that all the Dems on trial are now dismissed as well as Trump? No, it doesn't. But if I found out that it impacted one of my clients, that's the first thing I'd be asking for, of course. Second question. If Nadler, Schiff, Fauci, Pelosi, Maxwell, Liz, Cheney were all in the same cell, which one? I can't talk about that. And who would survive the prison cell island? I can't talk about that. No, we can't speculate on that, on death of, but it is an interesting thought experiment, isn't it? Who would survive on the island? You know, a great show. You can't talk about it in the context of Alone. Like there's this new show on Netflix. I was watching some of it last night called Alone, which is a lot of fun. And they just drop these people off on a desert island. And I'd like to see how that might, work out for Congress people, for example. Not Democrats or Republicans in general, just all of them. Pick, I don't know, 5 Republicans, 5 Democrats, put them on the Alone island and see who can build a shelter and who can catch fish and survive. What would Jerry Nadler do? I don't know. Probably wouldn't be good. Maybe he would. Maybe Jerry Nadler, he's out there for like 6 months. He comes out with like a bear outfit on and a bear head over him. And he's, got a whole farm and stuff. Who knows? I don't know, my friends, but that is it for the day. We had one more super chat that came in over from YouTube. Shout out to Paul Minot in the house. Paul Minot says, Wrestling Wednesday has a nice ring to it, and Singlet Sunday seems necessary. Could be a big hit with the wrestling community. Keep up the good work. Wrestling Wednesday. So maybe I should come out on my Saturday singlet. I don't own a singlet, but I used to. I used to own many singlets, in fact. Maybe I should get another one just for good old times, huh? Just to put the singlet on. I actually have been, so I work out at a local place right around here, and I've been talking with somebody who works at this place where I work out, and we're going to be sort of, he's taking the lead on this. Okay, I'm sort of helping to buy some things, but putting together like a wrestling room, right? With some mixed martial arts gear and some heavy bags and all sorts of equipment. And I'm super excited about that because there's nothing that exists like that in my local area. There's no mixed martial arts. There's no even, BJJ, nothing. So it's going to be fun. I'm having a lot of fun with it. But my point on that is, Singlet Saturday, maybe Singlet Sunday. Come out, put the singlet on, show you my takedowns. All right. That was from Paul Minot. Shout out to Paul. And shout out to everybody else who was a part of the program. I see over on our Rumbles channel, we've got Sedona Rocks, FedCure, CW Cats, Anything is in the house, and they're all chatting away along with Southern Bix and others. We've got FedCure over on Locals. We've got Jason on Blast. Zach Nichols says, what are you into, Rob? Well, I mean, look, I'm into mixed martial arts. I don't have I've done Aikido. I've done Taekwondo when I was a kid. I've done pancration here in Arizona. There's a club called American Pancration. I've done that. I've done a lot of wrestling. I was a wrestler in high school 4 years, and it's a lot of fun. I love to get my head beat in. It's very humbling experience. You go in there and you're like, I'm a tough guy. I'm really like, I'm pretty hard. And then you have this like 22-year-old kid. He's like, dip, 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 throws you right into this pretzel. And I remember that. Yeah, it's good stuff. Singlet Sunday, Edon Tess says he's in. And Sousen Academy says, I teach belly dance. Has been doing it for 4 years. Ooh, Sousen Academy. 40 years belly dancing. Ooh, spicy over there on the Locals chat. So you can see what's going on over there. Lava Java Lava does judo. Judo's cool. Judo's cool. I've done some of that. I don't like the gi. I don't like to wear it personally. I really don't. It doesn't feel useful to me. I sort of think that I'm not ever wearing something like that, and I don't want to necessarily compete in it. I like it for the exercise. I like it for the physical fitness and the mental fitness, but I don't think that I'm actually sort of a competition type of person. So in terms of like it'd be cool to get your black belt in BJJ, like no doubt about that. Like utmost respect for anybody who has accomplished that. I just don't know that I've got sort of the commitment over the next 7 to 10 years to do that. Maybe I do. Maybe if I found it sounds fun. I don't know. There's a lot to unpack there, and I'm not going to bore you with the rest of that. But the point is, thank you for being a part of the show. We have an awesome community on Locals over on Rumble. Shout outs to our members on YouTube. Stace on the Case. Jenny B is here. Lava Java Lava. Marvin. Lean is here. Philip Smith. Lean says she wrestles with Steve on a daily basis. That sounds good. Sounds good. It's good exercise. All right, shout out to Lean and shout out, oh my gosh, who is this person in the chat? Oh, all right. And so, my friends, that is it for us for the day. I want to give some final shout outs to our community over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. You know how to get there. Thank you for joining up on YouTube by clicking that join button right next to the subscribe button. Don't forget to remember our law firm. If you happen to come across anybody who is charged with a crime in the state of Arizona, we appreciate you referring them over to us. We have an awesome team of people. We're building some cool stuff. And I appreciate it if you think about us. If you know anybody charged with a crime, a DUI, domestic violence, anything like that, we can help. 480-787-0394. Free case evaluations. We have a mission to help good people charged with crimes find safety, clarity, and hope. Shout out to all the mods in the chat who are modding down the fort, keeping things in order. Of course, we've got K Bean in the house. I saw Lean in the house, Lava Java Lava, and I think that's it for the mods on the day. Shout out to the mods. We also have some thank yous that go out to our Spotlight supporters, qsimple.com, John. Thank you to Chris Romero, David B3, and Dr. EMB, who are all supporting the work that we do with that little extra love. And so we share a little bit of screen time. And that is it for me for the day. We are going to be back later, actually tomorrow. I'm planning on a live show. Remember that these highlights are being clipped from this and re-uploaded to this channel. So if you catch the whole live, you probably don't want to watch those unless you want to watch it again. But many people don't stick around for the whole thing, and so those clips are really for them. But just so you know kind of what's happening around here. But I am planning on a live tomorrow. We've got some shorts. We've got some walk and talks that happen every morning on our memberships. And so please join those places if you'd like to learn a little bit more or watch a little bit more. Otherwise, that is it for me for the day, my friends. Thank you so much for being here and being a part of the show. Have a great night. Sleep very well. See you right back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.